We talk about training family caregivers, but what does it look like when we look at it from a real world perspective? And that's what we're going to do today on Practice Lab, which is an episode of the Caring Pro Reset podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Denise Brown. We meet twice a month, the first Wednesday of the month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and then the second Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we look at topical issues impacting family caregivers and how we as professionals can serve them. The first part of our two-part episode every month is around taking a deeper dive into an issue, and then we put it into practice during Practice Lab, and that's what we're going to do today. So in our first episode this month, we looked at what does training family caregivers look like? And we talked about Medicare Part B as a benefit to train family caregivers. And today we're going to look at it from the perspective of three family caregivers and what kind of training could help them. Keep in mind as we go through our practice lab today, not every suggestion I'm going to offer would qualify for Medicare Part B training. But I think it's important that we have an expansive view of how we can train family caregivers beyond what Medicare will reimburse. And Medicare Part B reimburses professionals like occupational therapists and physical therapists, as well as like a nurse practitioner to train. And some of us, like myself, would not qualify, but it's still important that we offer training. And for me, I integrate training in coaching sessions that are offered to family caregivers. So that's what we're going to look at today. And here we go. We're going to connect today for just about 25 minutes. In total, we connect for two 25-minute episodes every, oh, sorry for the balloons. That is something that happens. And those two 25-minute episodes turn into one CEU credit. So if you are a nurse or a social worker interested in earning CEUs, you can join our Caregiving Support CEU Training Center on caringourway.com. And I'll remind you about that before we close. A little bit about me, just a reminder. So I started helping family caregivers in 1990, and I launched one of the very first online caregiving communities in 1996. I managed that until I sold it in 2000 to really focus on training. And then I was a family caregiver for my parents. I helped my dad for just about 20 years and my mom for almost 8. I cared for them at the same time. My mom died first in 2022, and my dad died just about 11 months later. So, what we talked about in our first episode was really thinking through what training family caregivers need, which meets an immediate need and prepares them for what could be next. And I think that's so important when we work with family caregivers. And I think about a client, we're not going to use her as a case study today, but it was so interesting to think about how to support her because it seemed like providing incontinence care was going to be next for her as she cared for her husband. I had been coaching her for about 5 months before she really started talking about that. You can imagine it's a very personal experience. It's very difficult to really just start talking about it. As she started disclosing some concerns about whether or not he was able to manage, one of the questions I asked was, "What kind of incontinence supplies do you have on hand?" Which led to a really helpful conversation with the client and her adult daughters, who all joined in a coaching call. So we talked about what incontinence products might be helpful to keep on hand. And sure enough, within about 2 weeks, she needed to use them. And it wasn't necessarily me saying, "How comfortable are you providing incontinence care?" It was me thinking about what supplies do you need on hand? Because oftentimes it's an emergency. And I didn't want her to be caught in an emergency without supplies. And then, because she had the supplies on hand, she continued to use them. So now she's managing his incontinence care. So it's really thinking through what could be next. So let's think about what we need as family caregivers. We are all expectant caregivers, if not entrenched or pragmatic caregivers. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about the 6 stages of caregiving, you can watch the first episode this month that we did. You can also watch recordings of episodes we did last month. And I'll include a link to the 6 caregiving stages in our show notes. So when I think about me, I'm an expectant caregiver. So I'm thinking through, what do I need to know about my brother and my sister and their spouses? So when I think about what training I need, it's training around effective communication when my 2 siblings have very different communication styles. So how do I start talking about this with them? I know it's important, but they are very different in how they receive this kind of information. So that would be what I'd love training on, is different communication styles within a family system. And how do I adjust my communication style so I'm effectively communicating with them? And if you have insights about where you might be in the caregiving experience and what training could help you, you are welcome to share that in the chat room. Let's get a little more specific, thinking about 3 family caregivers. So let's start with Anne. She cares for her husband who has a dementia diagnosis. He has frontal temporal dementia, which is what Bruce Willis has. The way it shows up for her husband, for Anne's husband, is in behavior, which is a little different than how it shows up for Bruce Willis. But that situation with Mr. Willis is what has really shined a light on FTD. Her husband is the one that has been managing the finances. And now she's noticing that perhaps it's not as easy for him as it was. In addition, he still drives. So in a recent coaching call, she wondered, when do I know to step in to manage finances? And when do I step in so he stops driving? Now, these are really big issues and concerns. And what would be helpful for Anne in terms of training is understanding the disease process and what happens to, for instance, executive function and processing that can impact the ability to manage finances and the ability to drive. If she understands what's happening within, for instance, the brain, she could then learn, how does that show up? What changes then happen within his behavior that would indicate there are changes within his executive functioning? So if she understands a disease process and what happens during a disease process, she can understand how it shows up. And then she's aware of signs to start stepping in. We had a coaching call where she was very clear that she wanted to reach out to her husband's doctor to have more information about these 2 issues. And what she needed help with was getting clear in her mind about questions to ask. In essence, being very clear the purpose of the doctor's appointment. And what's interesting is she was concerned that she was making things up in her head. And I think we all worry about that I am making this up. And so I am being, let's see, I'm borrowing trouble or I'm jumping ahead of myself. And so she wanted to be clear that what she was seeing was real. And we walked through the changes that she's noticed so she could see she is the best she has the best insights about what has changed for her husband and his behavior. So it wasn't her imagining it, it was what was really happening. And when we talked about what was happening, we then decided to focus in on two really important issues, which was managing money and driving. And then she was able to really be clear about the questions she wanted to ask so that she's ready if something needs to happen. We also decided that she can start doing some things without really talking to the doctor. So, one of the things she's going to do is just check in and review their bank accounts once a month. And then we also talked about ensuring her sons have access to the bank accounts so they can check as well. So that gave her peace of mind that there's a check in place. And then she was clear around what's the strategy in the doctor's appointment? What's really happening? What can I do about it? What do I need to know that could be next? So when you think about that as training, it's training around how to effectively communicate within a doctor's appointment around real concerns and then asking for help around when to step in. I think that's the big concern. You don't want to step in too soon and take away something that is very important to a caree, but you don't want to step in too late because then it could be that there's been some unfortunate situations with finances or with driving. And she can ask the doctor as well what resources are available in the community to help me, for instance, monitor his driving. So that's the first scenario. The second is a family caregiver named Don. Actually, I'm using assumed names. We'll call him Don. He's been caring for his wife who has dementia as well as OCD. And you could imagine that combination is very difficult to manage. They live together in their own home, and Don has help coming in the afternoons. And it's about 3 hours in the afternoons where he has a break. His wife fell and fractured her hip. And the fall happened at night when he was helping her to the bathroom. She was hospitalized, and then she had a short term rehab stay, and then she returned home. She's using a walker. So you can imagine the training that Don needs is around helping his wife at night if she gets up to avoid a fall. So she's a very high fall risk now. The other part about this is it's training to be okay supporting his wife as she goes to the bathroom. He is terrified of another fall. And being so nervous about that impacts his confidence helping her to the bathroom. So it's around supporting him so he doesn't blame himself. And if he blames himself, he's nervous about helping her because he sees himself as the reason she fell, and that's not the reason she fell. And that's really important. So it's around having him demonstrate how he helps her and then really reminding him that he's doing it right. So he's been doing it. Now he worries as he's been doing it wrong. So it's important. And I would also say it's important to have this training happen at home. So in their environment. So it's the occupational therapist, it's the physical therapist, seeing them in their environment, watching Don help, and then saying, you're doing this right. And you know what else? It's not just you're doing this right. It's you're doing this right because of this, being very specific in the confidence of why he's doing it right. If you are clear and specific around why a family caregiver is doing it right, you are reinforcing that they continue to do it right. We need details. We just don't want to hear you're doing it right. Tell me why. Why am I doing it right? It's so helpful. And I often think that piece gets overlooked. I think sometimes if you're receiving home health benefits, for instance, and you have PT and OT coming into the house, they are quick visits. And so what they're doing is just saying, yeah, you're doing it right. And you think, that's enough. I told him he's doing it right. And we want to know why we're doing it right. So we continue to do it. And what happens when we hear the detail of why we're doing it right, we intentionally continue to do it right. And here's what else is important to say to the family caregiver about why they're doing it right. It's not only technique, but it's also supplies that are nearby and ready to go. So you're looking at the entire environment. You're looking at how has the family caregiver set the stage, for instance, for providing care. You're acknowledging that this is great the way you've set it up. This is awesome. And your techniques are really good. And here's why. And if you see techniques that could be improved, you can say, here's what you could do that could be really helpful because of this. So if you walk a certain way behind your wife, what's really effective is this, whatever reason. So if you see room for improvement, you want to share why it's important to start doing something better. Again, we want to be intentional about how we're providing care. The other thing that I think is really important with Don is starting to think about what could incontinence care look for his wife. So for instance, she's a significant fall risk. If something were to happen, even if it's not another fall, but let's say she has the flu, it might be that rather than helping her up at night, he's able to help her by using incontinence products, so she stays in bed at night, and then he's gonna get her up and change her in the morning. But it's really important to help him understand what are the right products, not only that she wears, but that they use on the bed. And then how do you help someone when you help them up so that you're also providing cleanliness and hygiene as part of that training? So it's insights around what supplies to keep on hand. And I think it sounds so basic. Don't we all know what incontinence products to keep on hand? We don't. We don't know. We don't know. And it's really helpful if someone tells us what to think about having on hand, how to use them, and then what we also use in terms of keeping our carry clean. It might not be possible to shower and bathe every day. However, we want to think about how do we keep them clean every day. In addition, it could be sharing suppliers that a family caregiver could start using. So, for instance, there are suppliers you can call that'll provide free samples of products while you're trying to figure out what works. And the best time to get free samples is before there's an emergency where you think, "Oh my heavens, I wish I had these supplies on hand." So just like I asked that other family caregiver I mentioned earlier, what kind of incontinence supplies do you have on hand? That's a conversation to start with Don as well. And then sharing resources, suppliers he can call to get samples. So he's got supplies on hand. We just don't know what will happen next. And I always think if you are caught off guard with incontinence needs, oh, it's very difficult. It's just feels like you're living a nightmare. So we want to be ready. Okay. And then here's the third one. So this family caregiver has been a 24/7 caregiver for her husband for 10 years. He had another stroke 2 years earlier. When he returned home with hospice services, and Kim loved the extra help. She was doing it all by herself for years. When hospice started, all of a sudden, she had a nurse visiting every week. She had help with bathing. Sorry for the thumbs up. She had home health services. Her husband had a chaplain who visited him regularly, who he loved. She had this help. Around 7 months later, hospice discontinued services, and it was devastating to her. Absolutely heart-wrenching. She had help, and then she didn't. So I supported her as she worked through what's this transition plan? What's the next kind of help? And she figured it out. She figured it out. It was hard. He recently had another decline that led to a hospitalization. He's returned home, and they had suggested hospice services for her. When they first started talking to her about it, she said, "I don't know if I can go through that again where I started and it stops again." She articulated that to the intake nurse and to the social worker, and they both said to her, "It's not going to happen." And that was not enough for her to hear. And what was interesting is we had a coaching call a few days after these conversations. And I asked her, "What have they shared with you around where your husband is in his end of life?" And they hadn't shared. They had not told her what they see in terms of what's happening with his body that would indicate he's not going to be discharged from hospice. When I was in the coaching call with her, something that was so, it just was screaming at me was, she is so worried he's going to be discontinued from hospice that she is missing that he is dying. So her focus is on keeping him covered through hospice services. And so we have a plan in place for that because she is worried about that. And she cannot worry about that without having a plan in place. So she is documenting every day what's happening with her husband, and that's helping her. What was interesting is the hospice nurse and the hospice social worker really dismissed this worry. You don't have to worry about that. And that did not help her. She's worried about it. So this plan we put in place that she's documenting is helping her. And what I helped her see is she is documenting that her husband needs care from hospice and she needs support from hospice. That's her goal in documenting. And then the other piece of it is what's happening with her husband that they believe he is dying. So she is now going to ask the hospice team, what do they see around his body and the changes that are happening with his body that indicate he is dying? She wants the truth. She doesn't want her worry to be minimized. She wants the truth. And so the training for Kim is around what happens to the body at end of life. And she needs specific insights around this. She told me she's been searching online for signs. She needs to hear it. She needs the hospice team to show her what is happening in his body that would indicate he is dying. If they are convinced he will not be discharged from hospice, it means he is dying. So tell her, show her, show her what's happening in his body so she knows. So it's interesting to think about how we sometimes shy away from the truth because we think, oh, she's been this loving wife for 40 years. I don't want to tell her her husband is dying. But what they're doing is creating so much uncertainty, she cannot stop worrying. And what she needs to be is fully present with her husband during his last weeks, his last month, whatever it is. That's the training they need to provide for her. And they also need to help her understand with pain management at end of life, there could be a time where she's dispensing meds every 4 hours, and they need to let her know now so that the day when his pain needs that much medication, she is not scrambling to figure out, how do I do this? Because it's her. It's just her. So training around end of life is critical, even for someone who's already received hospice services. In addition, she is someone who understands how to care for someone who's bedbound with incontinence care. However, there are some family caregivers who have a carry who's ambulatory and then decline. And when hospice starts, they decline to such an extent that they need a hospital bed, and care for someone in a hospital bed is very intense. It is not something that we just naturally know how to do. And hospice has to be ready to provide that kind of training. Here's what happens when your carrie's in a hospital bed and no longer able to get up and go to the bathroom on their own, no longer able to turn so you can change bed sheets, no longer to turn so you can help you have some assistance with a bed bath. Hospice has to be ready to deliver that kind of training. And I will tell you, as someone who cared for both parents on hospice, we did not get that. I asked for it. We did later get it because I asked for it, but it wasn't something that they said, the first time the home health aide comes to bathe your mom, your dad, we're also going to show you how to do this yourself. Bottom line, with training, we're giving answers so that family caregivers aren't living in uncertainty and with guesswork, because that's worries. And it's not about trying to be delicate with them because they aren't strong enough to handle the truth. It's about being truthful with them because they are strong enough to hear the truth. And what keeps them weak is keeping them guessing. It's the truth that strengthens them. And we have to be truthful when we're doing training. Have to be truthful. Okay, we did it. It was a lot in a little bit of time. So I just want to let you know we do have a free training program for family caregivers. We call it a Certified Family Care Manager. And that's on our community, which is called caringourway.com. And as you join me for these, if you want to earn CEUs, join our Caregiving Support CEU Training Center. And it's $100 to join. You can earn 20 CEUs on an annual basis. And in the month of November, and we're in November 2025, you can save 20%. Just use coupon code November. Okay, before we close, any questions? Okay, so this is really helpful. Okay, Our so it's always awesome when I have a live attendee, and we have a live attendee who was having some glitches with his technology. Otherwise, I would have him come on live, but he's starting a caregiving support group. And holy moly, this is really great to have this kind of insight. I hope. And you can tell me how helpful it was or not. Oh, yeah, it's still no sound. I'm so sorry. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I'd love for you to keep coming and sharing your experience with us and letting us know what will help you. That's really important. And what I love about knowing what helps you is that expands our knowledge base. Every caregiving situation is different. And we cannot go in with just a generalized plan that believing it works with every family caregiver. It does not. We have to really understand what works for you and then think through how do we modify training so it works for you. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you came today. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm glad we connected too. Okay. So I'm going to close for today. Yeah, so no worries about your sound. That's just what happens. That's just what happens. Okay, so I'm going to close for today. And just a reminder, you can register to join our live events on caringourway.com. Okay, thanks everybody.